Hello and welcome to HoneyBadgerRadio. My name is Alison and I'm your host of this channel. And I'm here today with Hannah Wallen to talk about the HBR topic for this week. So Hannah, what is it you're going to talk about? What are you going to lay out there for everybody to peruse, as it were?
We're going to talk about the problem of orthodoxy and unquestionability in science and research and politics and so on. And it's going to be us talking to Deborah Pawnee this time, and because she is going up against sort of the orthodoxy in an area of research, the standard in feminist research, looking into issues of domestic violence, is that you have a patriarchal tendency in men to want to control women through violence, and that's what causes domestic violence. And it doesn't explain the majority of domestic violence, so then they can't acknowledge that part, right? Because the majority of domestic violence is actually initiated by female violence in the home. And if women are hitting first, then it's not men using violence to control them, right? So with that situation, she's faced quite a bit of pushback. She's also had quite a bit of enthusiasm from people who actually want to improve the situation for victims of domestic violence, both sexes. And people who actually care that women are getting hurt because women are initiating violence, and then in the course of the conflict, eventually they're pushing the men that they're violent against to the point where they defend themselves. And when it comes to physical strength, speed, endurance, even agility in a fight, men are better at all of those things. And so when you push them to the point of reaction instead of just consideration and running away and trying to diffuse the situation, when you push them to like a panic reaction, you basically put yourself in a situation where you're facing an opponent now who is bigger and stronger and faster than you, and has actually a lot more experience defending in a fight than you do. And it really is not good for either sex. And one of the things that led me to this was actually talking about the climate sort of panic that's going on, and how much of it is we have to panic over these things, and you're not allowed to question them, and nobody who disagrees with the panickers is allowed to talk about their perspective. And that includes science, perspectives, scientists that have said, no, these guys are doing it wrong. So you can't have any debate over this at all. And therefore, since we're not allowed to, shame on you for debating this, we're not allowed to debate this, the science is settled and you have to accept it. And we're told the same thing with intimate partner and sexual violence. We're starting to get told the same thing with, well, biology isn't real if we're talking about trans issues. And, we have this back and forth with trans issues in science isn't real if we're talking about trans issues, but this is a science, and science is real when we're talking about trans issues. So it goes back down to obedience. Well, that destroys the ability to gather information and assess it and make productive decisions based on that information in the field of science. It basically destroys the ability to progress as a species, and it destroys the ability, if you look at trans issues again, it destroys the ability to potentially figure out a way to give people of trans status the best life they could possibly have after discovering that they suffer from gender dysphoria. Because you develop a narrative and you can't question it. It destroys the ability to give people who have experienced domestic violence the best life they could possibly have after they've experienced that, because you can't look at the information and figure out ways to improve their situation. And the same thing with climate change. We can't look at that situation and figure out the best course of action to take because we can't talk about it. We have to be talked to about it and told what to do. So this discussion is basically going to be about when you have all these things going on, where are men supposed to
well,
find their
put it
place?
This way. Let me put it this way. I think this is paralleled in what we're seeing in the moral dimension, or the alleged moral dimension. I spoke about how we've changed morality from being an action. So when we look at, for example, like I guess the morality to look at that's sort of the basis of our society is the Christian morality. The Christian morality is based on the actions you take. And there's a certain amount of thoughts, like don't lust after your neighbor's wife and that stuff like that. But for the most part, it's actions. And you can become a moral person by pursuing moral actions in your life. But now we have this new concept. Well, it's not really a new concept. It's actually a very old concept. That morality is based on physical qualities that you cannot change. So, in other words, a white man can never be more moral than a black woman. So morality goes from a personal act or the development of personal qualities or personal abilities to a static thing that confers social and political power on someone. So it's more like a caste system, like the in India. But what's really interesting is that it's static and it is not focused on your actions. So your morality doesn't come out of your actions; it just comes out of an accident of birth. And
nothing you can do can change your situation.
And nothing you can do. Well, I mean, you could guess damage yourself and maybe get into a protected category in terms of disability, or you could identify as something other than what you are, and again get into a protected category because of that. But for the most part, your situation on this not moral. Let's say this social caste system is permanent and based on what you were born as. So. But what the point is that this is taking morality and removing it from the realm of action, the realm of development, the realm of seeing yourself in terms of how your actions affect the greater world, into the realm of concrete and unchangeable physical attributes. And what you're seeing with academia is the same thing. It's going from a pursuit of knowledge based on your observation, based on your actions and observation of the effects of those actions, to a orthodoxy that cannot be questioned and is simply received. And the way that this sort of ties into masculine and feminine, not necessarily male and female, because there are masculine women and there are feminine men, is that the masculine approach or the masculine gender expression orientation looks at how actions affect the world in order to define itself, whereas the feminine gender expression looks at how things are received, or the world, they receive the world and experiencing and expressing it to define itself. So what you're seeing...
Yeah, this is exactly what I was about to bring up.
Yeah, so what you're seeing is this almost removal of the masculine from all of these institutions to their detriment, to be quite frank. It's to their detriment. Yeah. Because these institutions, the morality needs to remain a result of your actions. It can't become something that you just have by virtue of birth. That's going to create the most untenable, like it's not a modern concept. That is an archaic concept, and it does not belong in a world with cars and traffic lights and automobile and airplanes. It just doesn't, because it's just not going to function. And also academia becoming institutions of orthodoxy also doesn't belong in a modern world. So this idea that we no longer see things in terms of people taking actions. We no longer see a moral person in terms of the actions they take, or an academic in terms of the virtues that they hold and the principles that they hold to, the pursuit of truth, the action of trying to find truth. We no longer see those things, then these institutions will become dysfunctional. And those are masculine qualities. In a world where we say masculinity is toxic, it's no wonder that our institutions are lacking in the masculine gender orientation expression that created them, whether or not it was expressed in a man or a woman, because there have been women in the past that have adhered to these principles as well. Certainly the principles of moral agency in a religious context. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Hannah, and you add what you wanted to.
Well, yeah, it was basically what I was wanting to bring up is that in addition to the damage to the institutions, this damages men's ability to act in the world in a way that they have a purpose. You know, men do not just sit around and wait for the universe to tell them who they are and what they where they belong, what their value is, and that kind of thing. Men create their value. They create their relationship to society and they create their relationship to the world. So where you have this situation of, well, now you're not allowed to question anything. You're just going to be told everything. And even if it's wrong, you can't question it. Um, we're going to see a massive crushing of the spirit of masculinity. You know, you have the intellectual side of masculinity, you have the emotional side of masculinity, but there's a spark underneath all of that that is just the spirit of masculinity. That this is what shines inside of men. Anytime any situation comes up, this is how men handle it. And I believe that if we don't find a way to address the you can't question anything factor, then we're going to actually see the end of men, or at least the end of masculinity. And I don't know what men will become. Maybe they'll have to put a lot more estrogen in the water through birth control pills or whatever to change men permanently. But this is really bad, and I think it's going to take a combination of men standing up against it and saying, no, you can't do this to us, it's abusive, and women in their lives recognizing that it's very important that we have both the the female approach and the male approach to things. So we have to be able to observe and live with things that you have to adjust to, but you also have to be able to question and see what you can change, see what you can affect in the world, and how you can affect it. And if we don't have both, then we will not survive as a population. So women have to be on board with recognizing the value of men's agency and their own as well.
Yes. And what's really funny is there's a lot of, like, for example, New Age who are talking about, oh, it's the eclipse of the feminine and we're an excessively masculine. It's like, no, that's not what's going on at all. We suffer from a lack of respecting the masculine. And what you're seeing, what you're actually identifying is we suffer so badly from respect to the masculine that we even despise the masculine qualities in women, to be quite frank. And we're trying to destroy them. And it may actually, in some ways, be the destruction of the masculine within women, which is, a gender fluid concept. It's not binary. That our society, like the worst aspects of what our society is doing, comes out of that. And I mean, of course, there's also the destruction of the masculine in the men, but I think that the destruction of the masculine in the women is what leads to that, because then women use their power without any conception of how it affects men, if that makes any sense. But I'll move on to say this. I find it interesting that these New Age people who say that we have too much masculinity, well, what I've noticed is they do the same thing that everybody does. They use masculinity as a trash can to hold all the things they hate. And then they look at the trash can that they've constructed and called masculinity and say, there's too much of this trash. It's like, well, you realize that only means that the only thing that you're saying is, the only thing you're really expressing is your disgust and hatred and disrespect for the masculine. And these are the people who are saying, well, there's too much masculinity in the world. Well, you've just basically said that masculinity is trash. Of course you're going to say there's too much. It's a tautology. That's how you say that word. Okay, so if you would like to watch or listen, perhaps would be the better term, to more of this discussion, please go into the low bar and click the link to HBR's live streaming channel, Badger Live Streams. And it should be on Thursday at
7:30 p.m. Eastern.
7:30 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.
All right. Go there or be square-ish, a rhombus. All right. Bye. Thank you for your attention.